In August this year, US President Donald Trump approved a multi-billion-dollar arms sale to Taiwan, the biggest since the start of his presidency almost 3 years ago. But China is furious.
Beijing would always express anger and discontent and try to retaliate whenever it sees signs of arms sales or engagement.
China warned the US of serious consequences, threatened to impose sanctions against companies involved in the sale, and demanded a reversal of the US approval.
Taiwan is always a card for the United States to play vis-à-vis China.
What will be the impact of the US arms sale on cross-strait relations? Will tensions escalate in the run-up to Taiwan's elections in January 2020? And will Tsai Ing-Wen's defiant stance against China get a favorable nod from voters and boost her re-election bid?
拒绝一国两制是2300万台湾人民不分党派、不分立场、彼此间最大的共识。
It's about 50 times bigger than Singapore. The 14,000 square mile island, with a population of around 23.6 million, is located 100 miles east of the People's Republic of China. Its political status is ambiguous, and it is not officially recognized by its most important supporter, the US. Yet, Taiwan is America's 11th largest trading partner and a vital link in Silicon Valley's supply chain.
For the United States, Taiwan is an important partner in the Asia-Pacific. As the United States draw down US forces in the Middle East, winding down their involvement in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and now more recently we've seen in Syria, the shift of US military forces is going to Asia-Pacific.
Without support of the US, the mainstream international community would not speak for Taiwan. So the US has played a leading role in mobilizing some important countries to support Taiwan's meaningful participation in the international community.
The Americans has a long tradition of supporting democratic allies, and now with a more overt ideological battle that's being waged between democracies and authoritarian regimes, it can only but increase the value of Taiwan as a democracy and as a participant in efforts to push back against authoritarian encroachment.
In April 2019, in a massive show of support to Taiwan, the Trump administration started rolling out a series of approvals for multi-billion-dollar sales of weapons to the island. Initially, a $500 million F-16 training and parts package was approved. In July, there was yet another endorsement of a $2.2 billion sale of hardware, including 108 M1A2 Abrams tanks and 250 Stinger surface-to-air missiles. In August 2019, these were followed by an approval of an $8 billion sale of 66 F-16V fighter jets, the single largest from the US to Taiwan in many years.
It's $8 billion. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of jobs. It's a great aircraft. And we really believe, or we perhaps wouldn't have done it, they're going to use it very responsibly.
It increases the morale of the Taiwan military. It comes with training. It comes with maintenance support. It comes with all of the logistics support that make it not just a weapon, but a capability, right? The ability to use it.
The sale marks a major advancement for the island's aging defense capabilities. But China vehemently protested the sale as it regards Taiwan as an inalienable part of its territory. In retaliation, China stepped up the pace of its military drills close to Taiwan's straits, while Taiwan responded with its own drills by deploying its most advanced fighter jets.
中方敦促美方充分认清美售台武器问题的严重危害性，恪守一个中国原则和中美3个联合公报的规定，立即取消该项军售计划。
这个中国一直以来都对台湾这个美国对台湾的军售都有这个很强烈的反弹。那他们对于世界各国对台湾的这个不管是在安全上面的合作，也都一直是非常的这个反对。我相信这是反映中国的整个帝国主义的心态，他们一直担心台湾拥有更多的这个自我防卫的能力。
There will always be symbolism attached to any arms sales to Taiwan. Greatest danger for regional stability would exist if Beijing were to convince itself that United States is no longer willing to assist Taiwan, that it could escalate in the Taiwan Strait, perhaps even launch military operations against Taiwan, and the United States, with the expectation that the United States would not become involved.
It's a deterrent signal to Beijing that the U.S. stands behind Taiwan, stands behind their continued survival. And of course, it raises questions in Beijing's mind about U.S. intervention in the event of a conflict.
The largest physical representation of U.S. commitment exists in the form of the American Institute in Taiwan. On June 11, 2018, after 9 years of construction, the United States formally opened the new $250 million building, housing more than 400 American diplomats and staff. It is the de facto U.S. embassy in Taiwan.
The new building of American Institute in Taiwan is a symbol. It's a picture, a scenery that show American commitment to Taiwan, and in some way that can boost the confidence of Taiwan people that the United States is here to stay.
As we dedicate this building, we have an obligation to work with one another to defend our value and protect our joint interests. As long as we stand together, nothing can come between us.
China did not lose an opportunity to state its disapproval on the day of the inauguration ceremony, attended by President Tsai Ing-Wen and former President Ma Ying-jeou. China reiterated that the US, by sending officials to Taiwan under whatever pretext, severely violates the One China principle, interferes in China's internal affairs, and exerts negative impacts on China-US relations.
The new building obviously is symbolic, but I mean, its real importance is its function. It's there to enable the United States to maintain its presence and maintain a robust unofficial relationship. I mean, you have to remember, the US is still a Pacific power, right? The US has a Pacific presence. And the relationship with Taiwan, just like the relationship with Japan and South Korea and Southeast Asian states and Singapore, it's the same.
And so it carefully walks a fine line between not angering the Chinese government because of the formal obligations and formal recognition with Beijing, but it also doesn't want to abandon a long-standing partner in the Asia-Pacific.
US-Taiwan relations go back to when the Republic of China was in mainland China and was an ally of the United States during World War II against the Japanese. As we know, the Kuomintang lost the Civil War in 1949. They fled to Taiwan and they established their ROC government here in Taiwan. And that relationship continued with the Americans. So Taipei was for a number of years, the official government of all of China. Now, in 1979, the U.S. government decided to switch diplomatic relations and establish relations with the People's Republic of China, whereupon U.S. Congress proposed the Taiwan Relations Act.
The Taiwan Relations Act, or TRA, is hailed as the cornerstone of US-Taiwan relations. 40 years ago, on April 10, 1979, the TRA was established by the Carter administration in response to a shift in diplomatic recognition of the nation of China from the Republic of China in Taiwan to the People's Republic of China in Beijing.
The law itself, with a very creative and ambiguous language, the law also gave the administration in Washington such a room to expand the unofficial relations or to squeeze the unofficial relations based on American interests. But so far, in the past 40 years, it had worked well. It had protected Taiwan from being incorporated into the People's Republic.
The TRA acknowledges without recognizing Beijing's claim to Taiwan. It views any attempt by China to coerce the island into unification as a grave threat to American security. It also authorizes the sale of weapons of a defensive nature to Taiwan. While most of these points have held steady from Carter to Trump, the sale of military equipment slowed after a deal in 1992.
The decision of arms sales itself is political decision. It's not necessarily pure military decisions.
Some people think, hey, maybe the US is using Taiwan as a bargaining chip or as a soldier to combat mainland China if necessary. We don't think so. It's also very important for the US government to reiterate that it is not using Taiwan as a bargaining chip and it is helping Taiwan.
Under President Trump, we've also seen much more intimate and proactive engagement on the part of the State Department, on the part of other American agencies with Taiwan on democracy promotion, on media literacy, combating disinformation, combating cyber warfare. And this is all part of a nascent emerging strategy.
我想，因为我们一直面对到中国的威胁哦，我们看到在这个他最近对台湾的这些一连串的动作。包括从这个2016年以来，我们不断受到这个在我们的这个航空领域，跟我们在这个台湾海峡，甚至是我们的这个东部的这个海域，都出现了这个中国的这些飞机，这个军事的军舰的一些威胁，但他们不断在绕行台湾。
So that creates an incentive for both the U.S. and Taiwan to ensure that Taiwan has the means to defend itself. So not only is it the law that the U.S. not only provides Taiwan with those arms of a defensive nature, but also maintains its own capability to preserve Taiwan's independent nature. So that's the fundamental interest.
The arms sale may be consistent with the history of US support for Taiwan's defense, but it could be more than meets the eye. In the backdrop of an ongoing US-China trade war, some experts question why the Trump administration has chosen to approve the sale now. Could this be part of America's Indo-Pacific strategy aimed at curbing Beijing's growing clout in the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean? Or is the threat to Taiwan from China imminent?
They go around Taiwan every month, almost every month. They try to scare Taiwanese, they try to influence our economic performance, they try to make Taiwanese people fear them and become part of them. Be a friend, don't bully.
It is great to be here in New York, and Taiwan is a beacon of democracy in the Indo-Pacific. We have walked the long path from authoritarianism to free and open democracy, and that path was not an easy one.
The Taiwan Relations Act, enacted in 1979, underpins the unofficial relationship between Taiwan and the US. It enshrines America's commitment to assist Taiwan with its defense against Chinese aggression.
Our government will resolutely defend our freedom, democracy, and way of life. Over the past 3 years, we have worked day in and day out with 3 goals in mind: to keep Taiwan safe, transformed our economy, and engaged with the world.
President Tsai Ing-Wen has leveraged Taiwan's unique bilateral relationship with Washington to bolster the island's defense capabilities. Between June and August 2019, the Trump administration approved multi-dollar arms deals to provide Taiwan with weapons of a defensive character. The U.S. interest is in a peaceful resolution of the cross-straits issue without unilateral action by either side.
They can't launch an attack against China. One of the key components in the Taiwan Relations Act is that the United States government commits to providing all capabilities necessary for Taiwan to protect itself. No more, no less. These are not capabilities that are meant for Taiwan to, say, hypothetically attack the mainland. That's out of the question altogether.
The weapons package from the US includes 198 Abrams tanks, 250 Stinger surface-to-air missiles, and 66 F-16 American Viper fighter jets. But what advanced capabilities can these weapon systems provide the Taiwan military?
Their radar capabilities are significantly enhanced. Their ability to engage targets much greater. They can see targets further away. They can track more targets than previous versions were able to, and they're able to engage them in a much more accurate manner than before. Traditionally, most combat aircraft were fairly reliant on ground-based radar systems to help track and vector them into the attack. The F-16s that we're talking about, these are radar systems which in a sense don't really rely on those ground systems any longer.
This is the single largest arms sale to Taiwan since former President George W. Bush sold 150 F-16 jet fighters to Taipei in 1992. According to Tainan legislator and chairman of the National Defense Committee, Wang Ting-yu, the Trump administration has moved faster on arms sale, while previous governments had taken longer.
We sent our request around March, so now we got a deal. So it's fast. It's much faster than we had before. When you ask all the Taiwanese, they always say China is the number one the country we don't like because they threat us all the time, threat our kids, threat our future. When we have good preparation, conflict won't happen. If we weaken our national defense ability, something bad will happen.
It's an objectively observable fact that the Trump administration is moving faster on arms sales. They're also more decisive. If you look at the Obama administration on foreign policy issues, they were very deliberative. The Trump administration is quite different. When a decision is made, it can be very quickly executed, and decisions are made quickly in this administration. And I think this is true across a lot of different issue sets, not just Taiwan.
You could regard this as containment or as a firewall against the PLA Navy, for example, expanding in the region and possibly destabilizing other countries. A sovereign Taiwan or de facto sovereign Taiwan certainly is reassuring to the Japanese government. We don't know how Japan would react if one day Taiwan became part of the People's Republic of China, and particularly if the People's Liberation Army were to occupy Taiwan. Some people have said that that would spark a major remilitarization on the part of Tokyo. So that makes a sovereign Taiwan a crucial part in that balance of power in the region.
But China possesses roughly 1,500 modern fighters, while Taiwan possesses around 400 fighters. The American Viper jets are a big boost to Taiwan's defenses. Yet, compared to China's might, the latest $8 billion F-16V fighter acquisition is no game-changer, analysts say. It may do little to alter the overall balance of power across the Taiwan Strait, as these are not a challenge to Beijing's land, sea, and air forces.
These are definitely not F-35s. The best analogy I can think of in F-35 is that of an American football quarterback. The F-35 can function as though it's a quarterback, coordinating a number of different platforms and capabilities into a single coordinated attack scenario. The F-16s are nowhere close to that. The F-35s also have some degree of stealth capability, which helps to reduce their radar signatures and gives them a certain degree of survivability. Therefore, these F-16s are nothing in that category. They do represent a fairly significant leap in the capabilities that the Taiwanese Air Force currently possesses.
The arms sale comes as relations between the United States and China are already being tested by a trade war and the decoupling of technology supply chains. Is the deal then an indirect message from Washington to China? Does it show the Trump administration's willingness to confront Beijing at a time when the US-China relations are at an all-time low on account of the trade war?
Well, Trump tried to sell some out-of-date F-16 with F-35 price to Taiwan. I view that as a propaganda to do two things. One is to help President Tsai, the current president, to win the election. Another is try to use it as a leverage to deal with China in trade talks.
I question the linkage between trade and other ongoing issues between the U.S. and China. You can't accuse the administration of having foreign policy chaos on the one hand, and at the same time harbor a conspiracy theory that they somehow are linking all of these issues into a grand strategy.
That it happened in the context of an ongoing US-China trade war is probably just unfortunate timing. If the United States were trying to use this arms sales as a way to stick it to the Chinese, so to speak, the indicator for that would have been much more visible. So swapping upgrades to F-16 fighter jets to F-35, the latest and the most highly prized technology that the US has developed. I think that would be seen as surprising and really making a statement to China about its displeasure with China's rise, the ongoing trade war, right? But I think we've seen more or less with this arms sales, every side sticking to script.
It's something that from a grand strategic perspective makes absolute sense. Your trade relationship may very well be the main interest to be secured, and you will use any number of instruments before you to help you to secure them. Plausibly, arms sales to Taiwan fits as one of those instruments that helps you to increase your leverage over your trade adversary.
I have had several interactions with people in Washington who are intimately involved in the processes of releasing weapons to Taiwan. I've yet to meet a single individual whose intention it is to anger Beijing with arms sales to Taiwan. And the United States, as a security guarantor, is assisting its allies, and Taiwan is certainly one of them.
For the US, arms sales and defense trade are key tools of foreign policy. The Trump administration rolled out a new Buy American plan in 2018 that had relaxed restrictions on sales while encouraging US officials to take a bigger role in increasing business for the US weapons industry. The US Defense Security Cooperation Agency has announced a total foreign arms sale of $55.4 billion for fiscal year 2019, an indication that America's position in the global arms trade remains strong.
Mr. Trump loves to make a deal or make America great again in monetary terms. So it's a dollar and cents. So big item sales with a larger package became possible. Taiwan has requested to purchase main battle tanks, the M1 tanks. The decision was not possible in the past 20 years, and finally the Trump administration gave a green light.
Even as China renews its call for cross-strait reunification under one country, two systems, Taiwan is standing firm against it. President Xi Jinping has identified reunification as fundamental to becoming a modern socialist power and for ushering in a new era for China. But what stops China from taking Taiwan by force?
Of course, mainland China can use force against Taiwan to eliminate those in support of Taiwan independence. But what will be the cost?
In June 2019, the US Department of Defense released the Indo-Pacific Strategy
and
Report.
business leaders to put your countries first.
It stressed the need for all regional allies and partners to uphold a rules-based order, ensuring peace and prosperity for all.
I call it the Indo-Pacific Dream. If it's going to be realized, we must ensure that all play by the rules, which they do not right now. The United States will no longer turn a blind eye to violations, cheating, or economic aggression. Those days are over.
The Indo-Pacific region, as defined by the US, is one that recognizes the interconnectedness of economics, governance, and security that shape the region's competitive landscape. According to the report, the region includes the world's largest economies, the United States, China, and Japan, and 6 of the world's fastest-growing economies, India, Cambodia, Laos, Burma, Nepal, and the Philippines. It accounts for 60% of the global GDP. But what is the significance of the term Indo-Pacific?
While we're seeing a rebalancing or a pivot once again to Asia on the part of the United States, that is now called the Indo-Pacific Strategy. More and more, especially since 2016, Taiwan has become a component of that strategy.
The United States has always been and will always remain a Pacific power. And so to have the United States step up its increasing engagement and interest with political allies is part of U.S. strategy to shift its focus to an area of emerging importance to U.S. national security interests.
We will no longer tolerate the audacious theft of intellectual property. We will confront the destructive practices of forcing businesses to surrender their technology to the state and forcing them into joint ventures in exchange for market access.
Analysts argue that Trump's Indo-Pacific strategy is driven by the US desire to counter what it sees as China's growing clout in the region. This is evident in China's military buildup on the artificial islands in the South China Sea. The Indo-Pacific Dream could be an attempt to re-establish a rules-based international order as opposed to a China-led regional order. But is this part of an overall US policy to contain the rise of China in the region?
It's not just about all capital and trade flows moving to China and then from China being redistributed to the region. It's about enabling connectivity and trade and commerce between players within the region and between the region and outside countries. And there's a fear that China is trying to exclude other economic and security powers from the region, and that's what they're pushing back against. That's not containment. I mean, and that's a real misnomer, and unfortunately it's part of a narrative that's out there, and it's not what the U.S. is pursuing.
Taiwan is strategically important to both the United States and an increasingly assertive China. The island's location, economy, and security are all essential to American interests. Analysts note that China would become a Pacific power if Taiwan were to become part of China. It would then control some of the world's most cutting-edge technologies.
Taiwan is an integrated economy. It's a technology hub for the region. It's a major foreign direct investor in Southeast Asia, in some cases larger than the US and larger than China in some areas. So I think it's a critical part of the fabric of the region. So that alone makes it important.
Due to geography, Taiwan is also one of the key links in what is known as the first island chain that separates China from the West Pacific Ocean. For American geopolitical interests, having a democratic ally as part of that island chain is quite crucial to its ambitions for the region as well.
It's both geostrategically important because of its location. It's economically important because of its open economy and its free flow of trade and information and technology and expertise and people.
As tensions continue to rise in the Taiwan Strait, it is imperative that the island enhances its defense readiness. China, for its part, has been preparing the groundwork for future invasion of what it considers a rogue province. According to a Pentagon report, President Xi Jinping has been investing heavily in the People's Liberation Army and in multi-domain advanced military capabilities. So, can China take over Taiwan by force?
Of course, mainland China can use force against Taiwan to eliminate those in support of Taiwan independence. But what will be the cost? It's not a cost-effective measure. Also, we have to think, after war between mainland China and Taiwan, Taiwan will be destroyed, or at least some of the important political and military centers of Taiwan will be destroyed.
那这是我们所担忧的事情，但是我们还是要再强调，就是中国这些行动，其实，就算台湾这边什么事情都不做，我们不做任何的自我防卫，你光是主张你是一个民主国家跟一个自由的国家，都在北京的眼里是一种挑衅的行为。
China were to take Taiwan by force, I think it would be destabilizing for the region. I think it would be harmful to China's own interests. I think it would cause capital flight. I think it would cause a lack of confidence in China and China's leadership that would lead to a really dramatic decoupling between China and the world.
China has also been actively engaged in efforts to isolate Taiwan by poaching its diplomatic allies. Since President Tsai Ing-Wen took office in 2016, Taiwan has lost 7 allies, bringing the total number down to 15.
No disrespect to small islands in the Pacific, but their ability to sway Beijing or to make a difference globally is extraordinarily limited. Whereas countries like Australia, Germany, European Union, India, Singapore, Canada, United States, Japan, South Korea, these are all significant countries that can, if they assess that it is in their interest for Taiwan to remain sovereign, have the ability to shape the environment in favor of Taiwan, not because they're being altruistic, but because it's in their own national interest for Taiwan to remain independent.
And your support for resolution backing our international participation has made you quite popular in Taiwan.
夺取台湾的邦交国，然后对台湾的大选进行干预，然后对这个台湾的这个海空领域的这些军事上的干扰，那甚至在国际组织上面的封锁台湾，在外交层次上面的打压，那这一系列的作为，其实他们才是真正在破坏这个整个区域和平稳定的一个这个力量。
There is going to be some backlash for people in Taiwan. Just recently, during the National Day address, Tsai Ing-Wen stated very publicly, and I think for the first time, a consistent message, which is that the notion of one country, 2 systems is dead on arrival, right? That's a non-starter for anybody in Taiwan. And whether you are light blue, shallow green, right? The majority of Taiwan consensus is now emerging coalescing around the view that we cannot accept that political system.
While Beijing officially seeks peaceful reunification, it has not ruled out the use of force to take control of the self-ruled island. And Taiwan has remained firm about safeguarding democracy and freedom. Can President Tsai's defiance counter Chinese aggression? Or will it backfire?
拒绝一国两制是2300万台湾人民不分党派、不分立场、彼此间最大的共识。 各位国人同胞，当自由民主受到挑战，当中华民国的生存发展受到威胁，我们就必须站出来捍卫。
Beijing and Taipei sharply disagree on the island's status. President Xi's speech in January 2019 invoking the One China principle hit a raw nerve in Taiwan. The idea of One China is contentious as it is interpreted differently by leaders on either side of the Taiwan Strait.
绝大多数的台湾人都认为我们是一个独立的国家，我们也不会接受所谓的一国两制台湾方案。习近平的这个谈话反而刺激了更多台湾人一个团结的意识，也刺激了台湾人要守住台湾主权跟民主这样的一个想法。所以我想蔡总统的这个立场，其实反映的是绝大多数台湾人的立场。
The CCP has staked its legitimacy on rejuvenating China, rectifying the so-called century of humiliation, and regaining territory that it claims was stolen by the Japanese and Western imperial forces.
According to Beijing, Taiwan is bound by the 1992 consensus agreed between the Chinese Communist Party and the Kuomintang or KMT political party, then ruling Taiwan. It states that there is only one China, but both Beijing and Taipei have different interpretations of the term. The ruling Chinese Communist Party uses the term to indicate that both the mainland and Taiwan belong to one China and will ultimately unify under the one country, two systems framework. Their counterparts in Taiwan hold different views.
During the KMT years, it is a KMT position as well as a party platform, right? It sees the formalized independence of Taiwan as a non-starter. And so there is this vision, again, of unification, and that's the common denominator it has with the Chinese Communist Party. But its vision of what that one China would look like is the KMT's version of China. So a free, democratic China operating under the constitution that's currently supplanted on the free regions within this China.
Tsai Ing-Wen tends to look at the disagreement part, that, hey, we disagree on the definition of one China. So we don't have any mutual, commonly acceptable ground for future dialogue. So not only Tsai Ing-wen has withdrawn from the past position of the previous KMT government, but Xi Jinping also withdrew from his position, engaging Taiwan peacefully.
A conservative from the Chinese Unification Promotion Party, Chang An-lo, believes that joining mainland China will bring happiness to Taiwanese. He upholds the one country, two systems principle.
可惜了，被妖魔化了，所以我必须回来告诉大家，我里面呢，一国两制的做了一个很好的一个蓝图。为什么呢？因为当年邓小平邓公提出来了一国两制，是为了台湾人民的前途设想的，为我们保障我们利益。可惜呢，我们弃之如敝履。
Chang An-lo is confident that it won't be long before Taiwan is unified with the mainland.
我是中国人，这没有问题的。我的认同就是中国几千年来有一句话啊，国家是永久的，制度是一时的。那么现在制度会与时俱进的。我在讲嘛，现在统一一国两制，将来一定会一国一制。
A distinctly Taiwanese identity has been emerging, mostly amongst the youngsters. A growing number of people in Taiwan feel that they deserve the right to continue an independent existence. And more than 75% of the island's population, according to a study, see themselves as distinctly Taiwanese.
若是有人问我讲我是什么人，我是对一国的人，我一定拢会讲我是台湾人啊。真的问题毋是迄个一国两制名称对毋对？真的问题是甲你签约的迄个对象是全世界上界阿爸，而且上界甲白纸黑字倒变过来讲的一个国家，嘛就是中国。这才是上大原因，毋是迄个名称甲系统的问题，是咱要甲上签这个物件的问题。反对现况。 实际上，咱中国足强，无毋对，但是迄个物件毋是讲伊强，咱就爱去跪伫因的面头前啊。中国是到目前为止，犹原是共产独裁的一个国家。咱看到香港顶一个毋是伊，但是变做是中国的地区，即马是啥物情形？那后一个就是台湾，你要继续行向中国的道路吗？我想这是真好选择的。
One of the largest protest movements in Hong Kong's history has fueled more anti-Beijing sentiment in Taiwan. The protests serve as a warning for Taiwan as it considers the future of relations with mainland China. They demonstrate that reunification may be fraught with huge political risks. There is also growing support in Taiwan for the Hong Kong protests.
我们认为台湾人民不可能也不应该对于香港民主抗争被逮捕的那些年轻人抗争者见死不救，不能见死不救，
台湾不能见死不救。
中共透过它庞大的经济的力量，甚至是透过收买人心的方法，想要渗透到台湾里面来把台湾推向一个民主的火葬场，葬送掉台湾既有所有的民主权利，来达成它地缘政治上面的目标。同时，我们看到，在过去一段时间以来，习近平也好，中共的高官也好，也屡屡的发表打压台湾既有的民主权利的言论。比如说，他们讲要推动所谓的“一国两制”台湾方案，这是许多台湾人民绝对不会接受，也不会答应的。
我能够在台湾去做一些什么，去帮助香港，去护持这一份自由。我也希望台湾不要沦为下一个香港，因为，很明显的，中共现在无所不用其极，用网络、用收买媒体、收买台湾的企业。
Hong Kong is a sad case because Hong Kong has been handed over back to mainland China in the 1990s. So Hong Kong has been ruled under the People's Republic. But in the case of Taiwan, People's Republic of China has never ruled Taiwan for even a day. And we have our own government, our military, our democracy.
Anybody who raises the issue that going forward, relations with China will only resume under the context of one country, two systems in Taiwan is going to be political suicide.
The reason why we have very tenuous relationship in the Taiwan Strait today is not because of Tsai Ing-Wen, it is because of decisions that Xi Jinping has made. Hong Kong only reaffirms why it is in the interest of the Taiwanese to maintain their way of life, knowing full well that integration with China, even in the best of terms, would likely in the long term result in a slow erosion of their freedoms and liberties and ability to express themselves as normal human beings.
Issues of Taiwanese identity and independence are taking center stage in the run-up to presidential elections in January 2020. Since the start of the movement in Hong Kong, President Tsai Ing-Wen has expressed support that has helped boost her approval rating in Taiwan.
拒绝一国两制是2300万台湾人民不分党派、不分立场、彼此间最大的共识。
Some people think, maybe we should choose Tsai Ing-Wen because she stands tough and she can speak for us and she won't kowtow to Beijing, which I think may not be so true. But I think this kind of selling this sense of urgency, sense of losing statehood to Taiwan people has helped Tsai Ing-Wen gain a lot of advantage over her competitor Han Kuo-yu, the Kaohsiung city mayor. That's why nowadays we have seen a salient leading.
As Taiwan heads for the polls in January 2020, the battleground is set for the grand face-off between DPP's Tsai Ing-Wen and KMT's Han Kuo-yu. With fewer than 100 days left before the elections, Tsai holds a solid lead in most polls over her opponent. Under Tsai Ing-Wen, a multi-million-dollar arms deal places the US-Taiwan relations at their best, while cross-strait relations are worsening. How these will play out in the elections remains to be seen. Will Tsai Ing-Wen's defiance boost her re-election bid? Or is it too close to call?
It will very much be an election based on whether Taiwanese want to fight for their values or they want to give the KMT another chance in the hopes that perhaps this time around everybody would suddenly become quite rich because we're having better relations with China. I find that hard to believe.
The poaching of diplomatic allies is not something that she engineered or wanted to create, right? So these events that are external to Tsai's direct control has indeed contributed to her surge in popularity. And again, the surge in popularity is reflective of the emerging and surfacing consensus within the island that we know what we don't want, and we don't want to be pressured or coerced excessively. It's going to be one that's going to help her and her party secure potential victory in 2020.